The day started like any other, with the dull buzz of my phone alarm dragging me out of dreams I could barely remember. The sunlight had barely begun creeping through the slats of my blinds, casting long sleepy shadows across the floor of my small but cozy apartment in Portland. I yawned, pushed my hair out of my face, and sat up slowly, already dreading the long shift ahead of me at the bookstore. My name's Amelia Brooks. I work part-time at a quaint independent bookstore while finishing my final year in English literature. Life's been fine, not exciting. Not terrible, just fine. And I guess that's what makes this story even stranger. Because it starts with something, or rather someone, I never expected to cross paths with. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when he walked into the shop. I was behind the counter, sipping lukewarm coffee and flipping through a dog-eared copy of Wuthering Heights when the bell above the door jingled. I glanced up and instantly froze. He was tall, wearing a gray hoodie, jeans, and sneakers that had seen better days. His hair was dark and wet from the rain, but still had that tousled, effortless look you only ever see in movies. He shook the water off his jacket like a dog and looked around, eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. "Hey," he said, with a nod, his voice smooth but casual. "Do you guys sell poetry?" Poetry. Of course, he was into poetry. I blinked, then stood quickly, trying not to knock over my coffee. "Yeah," I said, my voice wobbling slightly. "Right this way." He followed me to the back where our poetry section sat, usually untouched. As I pointed to the shelf, I tried to act like my heart wasn't beating faster than it had in weeks. Something about him was familiar, but I couldn't place it. "Thanks," he said, running a finger along the spines of the books. "You work here a lot?" I nodded. "Most days." He smiled slightly, almost shy. "Cool, I'm Jude, by the way, Amelia." We shook hands. His was warm and rough, like someone who worked with his hands. He pulled a copy of Mary Oliver's Devotions off the shelf and flipped it open. I lingered, watching him for a second longer than was polite. "You ever read her stuff?" he asked without looking up. "Only all the time," I replied. To my surprise, he laughed. It was the beginning of something I didn't have a name for yet. Jude started coming in every couple of days. Sometimes he bought a book. Sometimes he just talked. He told me about the strange customers at the coffee shop where he worked, or the old dog his roommate had, or how he wanted to write a novel even though he claimed he didn't know how. I found myself waiting for those visits, heart leaping every time the bell above the door jingled. But it wasn't until I saw him one afternoon walking hand in hand with a girl that everything inside me shifted. Her name was Ivy. She had bright red hair, perfect skin, and the kind of laugh that made people turn their heads. They walked past the shop window laughing at something only they knew, and my heart dropped. He wasn't mine. Of course, he wasn't. He had never said anything, never hinted. I was just the bookstore girl he talked to. Still, that night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake thinking about how unfair it felt to feel so connected to someone who wasn't even available. I told myself to let it go, to stop daydreaming, but I didn't. A week later, it was my birthday. I hadn't planned anything. My parents were out of town and most of my friends had work or school. I planned to order pizza and rewatch old movies alone. So when Jude walked into the store and asked, "Got any plans tonight?" I shook my head too quickly. "Nope," I said, trying to sound casual. He hesitated. "You should come by the open mic at Luna Beans. I'm reading something tonight." I stared. "You write poetry?" He scratched the back of his neck. "Kind of. It's more for fun. You should come." "Seriously?" I hesitated. I knew Ivy might be there. It would be awkward, even painful, but I nodded. "Okay." I showed up that night in my favorite navy sweater and jeans. The cafe was packed. Candles flickered on tables, and people stood holding mugs of cider. Jude spotted me from the corner and waved. I waved back, pretending not to notice Ivy sitting at a front table. His name was called, and he walked to the mic with a crumpled page. He cleared his throat and looked right at me before reading. The poem was about a girl with ink-stained hands and a heart full of stories. About small conversations that meant more than they should. About timing that never quite worked. My throat tightened as I listened. I wanted to believe it was about me. Maybe it was. When he finished, the room clapped. Ivy kissed him on the cheek when he returned, and I felt my heart crack. Still, I stayed until the end. As I got up to leave, he caught my arm. "Hey, you leaving already?" "Yeah," I said. "Long day tomorrow." He looked like he wanted to say something, but didn't. so I smiled and walked into the cool night. A week passed, then 2. Jude didn't come by the shop. I told myself it was for the best. Then, one evening, a message, "You busy?" I stared at the screen. Not, "Really, what's up, can I come over?" Just to talk. My heart pounded. I should have said no. I really should have, but I typed, "Sure." He arrived soaked from the rain. I handed him a towel, and we sat on the couch in silence. He didn't look like the confident guy I'd known. He looked lost. "I broke up with Ivy," he said, quietly. Uh-oh, double quotes. He rubbed his hands together. I didn't want to hurt her, but I couldn't stop thinking about someone else. I didn't say anything. I couldn't trust myself to. He looked at me, really looked. "You." The room went still. I blinked, but I thought. I didn't want to ruin what we had. I didn't even know if you felt the same. I should have been happy. I should have jumped into his arms. But something held me back. "Jude," I said softly, "you weren't mine. But I invited you in anyway." He frowned, confused. I liked you too much, but I didn't want to be the reason someone else got hurt." He looked at me for a long time. "So what do we do now?" I stood and walked to the window. The rain had stopped. The streetlights glowed amber. "We start over," I said. "As friends." He nodded slowly. "And if that changes, then it'll be for the right reasons." Jude smiled. Something in me softened. I knew this wasn't the end of our story. Maybe not even the beginning. But it was real. And sometimes, that's all that matters. Over the next few months, we did just that, started over. We got coffee, took walks, talked about everything and nothing. There were moments quiet, sweet wind, our hands brushed, our eyes lingered a second too long. But we didn't rush. One day, he handed me a notebook filled with poems, all of them about me. About the girl who wasn't his until she was. And one night, as we sat on the roof of my building watching the stars blink into life, he turned to me and asked, "Can I kiss you?" I nodded, heart full. This time, he was mine. And I had invited him for all the right reasons.